But Blade does more than slacktivism. He's out there in the streets, man.
I am. Remember when we were at that BLM march in Louisville and I got so mad I threw a brick through the window of a Wendy's?
I do, and I actually think about that a lot.
It was crazy, but sometimes you have to do what you need to do to send the message. And when the cops showed up, they did not take it easy on me. They walked right up and took my friend to jail.
Yes, they did.
Welcome to another episode of the show. We have a great episode as usual. So excited for you guys to hear our guest. We will introduce her in a second. If you guys are new to this show is called Polar Opposites because my co-host DONTÉ and I, we agree, we disagree. We always talk about important and relevant conversations dealing with entertainment, pop culture, music, and politics. And we never shy away from difficult conversations. It's not always doom and gloom. We do have fun, I promise. But, it's always a great conversation, and you guys are always here with us along the way, and we appreciate it. So if you love this show after hearing this, be sure to subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell your memas and peepaws, and all of you new listeners, tell your friends to subscribe. We love it, and we appreciate you guys for enjoying the show and listening to it. It's always a good episode, and I'm glad that y'all are coming on this journey with us. DONTÉ, how are you? How was your week? What's up with you?
I feel good, working out every day, so keeping the mental strong. You gotta do what you gotta do to protect your mentals, but it's a good week. How are you doing?
I'm glad you're having a good week. I'm not having a good week. So much has happened in the world. We're probably going to talk about it on this episode, but it's not been a great week. Obviously, I'm all about positivity and trying to keep a positive mindset, so I'm not trying to worry about that too much, but there are things that we obviously have to discuss. By the time y'all hear it, it'll be old news, but I feel like since we always talk about relevant issues, y'all want to hear our conversation in regard to this issue. But before we even get to that, we have our guest that we need to introduce, our first of many, hopefully, celebrities that are on the podcast. Tiffany Ferg, YouTube's very own, is joining us on this week's episode. Tiffany, we're excited to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I am very flattered to be called a celebrity guest. That's very generous.
Yeah, she escaped all the paparazzi to make this episode work. We're so flattered that she's here, but it's going to be great. So Tiffany, the listeners might not be familiar with who you are, so give the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, the basics, name, age, social security, all that kind of stuff.
So my name is Tiffany Ferguson. My YouTube channel is called Tiffany Ferg. And yeah, basically I'm a full-time YouTuber now. I just finished my bachelor's degree in media studies in December. So now I'm doing, full-time content creation, which has been interesting. I've been on YouTube since I was literally 11, 2007 was when I made my first channel. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of the YouTube eras and everything. And now I mainly do my series, which is called Internet Analysis. And it's basically a commentary series, media criticism and analysis. I like to talk about social issues and media, which can include, pop culture, social media. Basically, whatever I want kind of falls under that umbrella. So it's easy to twist whatever I'm interested in and just try to structure it in a way that's hopefully entertaining and informative.
I will say I am a subscriber of Tiffany's YouTube channel. I think that she does great stuff. It's part of the reason, honestly, why I asked her to, be on this podcast episode, because she does great work. I know that she was very humble in the way she described her stuff, but y'all, she has a lot to brag about. I'm telling y'all, it's really good content about a variety of different topics, and there's something for everybody, I will say.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet. It's still very surreal. So I don't know. I think of myself as a humble video creator. That's all.
I was binging a couple episodes, and one of the ones I really liked was about female body hair.
But then I wondered, why do I have this averse reaction to my own body hair? Why am I grossed out at the look of a full armpit of hair, or hairy legs, or a full bush? Where does this come from? Especially with armpit hair, I would think this just looks masculine. I feel like I'm looking at a man's armpit, which is interesting because everyone grows armpit hair. Therefore, it is not inherently a male trait.
That was a very informative episode.
Oh, yeah.
I suggest to anybody to watch that. That's a really good episode. So just giving you a shout out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So let's get into Off My Chest.
Justin's gotta get off his chest. Dante has got to get off his chest. Justin and Dante gotta get it off their chest.
So if any of you guys are new to this show, Off My Chest is the segment where we get to rant about anything that bothered us. We get to release some steam and just rant a little bit. So Tiffany, you are our honored guest this week. So what would you like to get off your chest this week?
Okay, well, you guys sent me an outline of the episode, the rough, plan, and you said it could be lighthearted, so I'm gonna start with a light one, because there's definitely some heavy that's gone on this week, obviously. I'm sure we'll discuss it. But my lighthearted complaint is about communal laundry in my building. I live in New York City, so it's a big privilege to have laundry in your apartment. At my old place, it was in our basement, and in my new place, I have, local laundry. So usually I don't have issues, but last time I went and I posted about this on my close friends on my story. Basically, there was already stuff in the dryer. And then I put my stuff in the washer. I go, okay, by the time my washer's done, the dryer will be open. I go back, and then they restarted their dryer, knowing that my stuff was ready. And I was like, excuse me? And every time I have these, it's always laundry that sets me off. Just because, I'm trying to be productive. I'm trying to get my little errands done and get my laundry done. And to have it thrown off by even one tiny little thing, that was me. That was me just a couple days ago. And now I'm like, well, I never want to do laundry again because one of my neighbors is going to be passive aggressive to me. And so that's my tiny little complaint that I want to get off my chest.
The lighthearted one,
Very
right?
light.
Did you have two or one?
That's all. I'll let you guys continue.
Okay. We have to talk about it. So Dante and I, we kind of have a duel off my chest. So you guys have been living in America another week. Another controversy has happened. So obviously we have to address the elephant in the room, which is Derek Chauvin, the police officer that put his knee on George Floyd. He got 3 guilty sentences.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
Guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of third-degree murder, and guilty of second-degree manslaughter.
It was a surprise to me because I know that just looking at the past and everything that we've been through as a country, the track record isn't good when it comes to police and accountability. And when the verdict came in, I was like, okay, 3 guilty verdicts. Love to see it. I think it's great. But at the same time, I saw people celebrating. And I think, people have a right to celebrate, especially the family. Getting some semblance of justice is important. But I was like, in the grand scheme of things, is this really justice? Because, George Floyd lost his life at the end of the day. If it was true justice, he would still be alive today while the police are held accountable for their actions. And that didn't happen. But I have more to say, but I want to hear Dante's thoughts and, get into his mind about what he thought about the whole ordeal.
Well, like you said, right, it was not, justice isn't the right term for it. Accountability is the right term for it. A man lost his life. That's not justice. I say on here every time we talk about these issues that cops are not the decision maker, whether you are guilty or you're innocent or whether you should live or you should die. Their job is to protect and serve. Even if that means they apprehend you, you should still make it to the police station alive, regardless of the crime that you allegedly committed. But for the people that are being and this is why I hate Twitter and I stay away from Twitter. For the people that are on Twitter being Debbie Downers and saying, the people that are saying things like, well, I don't know why you guys are celebrating. This is just one person out of thousands. You know why people are celebrating? Because this doesn't happen often. And it should. You take somebody's life, you should get punished for it. So that's why people are celebrating, because they've lived through seeing Rodney King get beat up on camera.
In 1991, 30 years before George Floyd, it was Rodney King. He was relentlessly beaten by Los Angeles police officers. He was tased and hit more than 50 times with batons. The 4 officers each faced charges of assault and excessive force. The trial was moved from downtown Los Angeles to the more conservative Simi Valley, where a nearly all-white jury was selected.
no convictions. They've lived through Trayvon Martin. It's almost been 10 years since Trayvon Martin. So we've lived through these things. So yes, people can breathe a sigh of relief and say, hey, well, I'm glad it worked out this time. But we know the work's not done. We know more cases are coming. DONTÉ Wright's case is going to be coming up this summer. So there's a lot more to be done, but accountability is a good first step.
Ooh. And here's why this show is called Polar Opposites, because I actually disagree with DONTÉ. I think people can celebrate to a point. And I'm not going to be one like twerking in the streets and shimmying and shaking over this, because at the end of the day, he has not been sentenced. The sentencing will happen in 8 weeks, and then we'll know how long he'll actually serve. So how accountable will he be? So that's why I say that people that are like, why are y'all celebrating, kind of like have a right to say that, because the work is not done. And then what made it sad is that hours after the verdict was handed down, I think Ma'Khia Bryant is her name.
Yes.
She was gunned down, which is another controversial case. So I think that people that say that have a right to say that. But what bothered me, honestly, was the politicians that came out and said, thank you, George Floyd. Oh, thank you for sacrificing your life.
Nancy Pelosi. That was unbelievable. I can't handle it.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous with justice.
She came out and said, oh, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life. And then record scratch insert right here. Right. I was like, sacrifice your life? He did not sacrifice his life. His life was taken unjustly. So it's like, what are these clueless Democrats talking about? And, you know, part of the reason Tiffany's on here is because she's versed in politics. What did you think about all of that, Tiffany?
First of all, I try, but also I really struggle because I find it hard to constantly stay in tune with politics, just because it's like constantly disappointing. The discussion we've had this week about it's like a step toward accountability or progress, but it's not solving anything. I feel like that's very reminiscent of when Biden was elected. It's like, well, I'm not necessarily happy about it. I'm glad Trump is out. Is this even going to actually help us really in any substantial material ways? And is anything going to be significantly different? Yeah, this week, I mean, I was surprised. And it's like just the fact that there's even a question, again, after we've seen those cops kill George Floyd, we've seen it. The video is like the most clear evidence. The fact that this had to be, obviously you have to go through the legal process, but like even then, the fact that everyone didn't know how this would turn out, because I think the number that I've been seeing is like 15,000 killings by police and maybe like under 10 convictions.
Ridiculous.
There's no faith in the system. Of course not.
And honestly, a whole different episode that we could get into is like policing and all of that and abolishing the police and all that could be a whole, separate conversation. DONTÉ, did you have one thing to say?
Yeah, so I know that, people may be like, man, you guys are talking about this. Well, yeah, if you're tired of hearing about it, guess how tired we are of living it? Because that's our constant reality, right?
Yeah.
I don't know a black person that doesn't have anxiety when they get pulled over. Your papers could be in order. You could be, an upstanding citizen. Nothing's wrong. But I know if I see a cop behind me, it's like, all right, both hands on the wheel, palms are sweaty. I don't know what's about to happen here. Like at the end of the day, I just want to make it home. I think that hopefully there are going to be more outcomes like what we saw in Minneapolis with people being held accountable. Because at the end of the day, the law system is for reform and to be a deterrent. You don't want to, you commit a crime, you go to jail. You don't want to go to jail, don't commit crimes. You don't want to go to jail, stop killing people that you're supposed to be arresting. Simple as that. So hopefully other officers see this and they see what was important about this trial is that the blue wall, as they call it, broke, and he had other officers testifying against him. So now that they see that this is possible, hopefully it is a deterrent. Hopefully people don't mix up their taser and their gun.
As if that's a mistake or accident. Imagine if a heart surgeon, I accidentally tripped up the wrong artery. I'm sorry. I'll keep my license. It doesn't work like that. When you make huge mistakes like that, especially as a doctor, they're held to a different standard and it's not fair. Honestly, doctors have the power to, not that they kill people, but they have the power to end somebody's life if they're not careful. Same with police. So why aren't the standards that they're held to equal? Makes no sense. And to cap everything off about this before we get into the main topic, let's not kid ourselves here. The only reason why this verdict was the verdict that it was is because all of it was caught on video. There were witnesses, there was video evidence. How can you, after seeing everything, say, you know what, not guilty? It was clear. And there's not enough, instances of police violence that are clear. These are the ones that are just documented, but people don't think about the ones that aren't documented. Rodney King was so big in the 90s because that's when people had camcorders and people started videoing, and they saw that. And that happened all the time, but that was one of the first instances where people saw, wow, the police, why are they beating him brutally? He's not even fighting back or resisting. Make that make sense. So we also have to be, honest about how this came to be. But at the same time, a semblance of justice was served, but I'm still waiting on the sentencing.
Yeah, there's so much conflict. I've thought about, like you mentioned, abolition, and, you don't want to cheer for someone going to prison if you're against, the concept of prison overall. But of course, in this situation, you're like, well, in the society that we live in, I'd rather this guy be in jail and the other cops that hopefully get convicted of this as well, rather than having them, be able to live their lives and get away with this. It's such a tough conflict where, again, you don't trust the police. You want them to do the job that they're supposed to do, protect and serve. But we've seen endless examples that they don't do that. And then you want to trust the justice system. But then it's like, again, you can't rely on this. And you would hope that at least even just this bare minimum standard of there's so much proof, there are so many witnesses, there's so many people there that will, testify against the person. Even in this situation or situations like this, often the conviction doesn't happen. And so that also lessens people's faith in this system.
Justin, I have an idea. So we're talking about accountability and, there needs to be deterrence, right? You know how when they passed the crime bill, they put in mandatory minimums, right? Hey, you get caught with this much weed, it's over. You're going to jail. You get caught with crack, bye, 30 years. Your kids won't know their daddy. Maybe we should put in mandatory minimums for people that kill people they're supposed to be arresting in the line of duty. Because that's a major deterrent there.
Hey.
Right? I guess I got to be the radical one today.
Like, please do. Yes.
Y'all know I like to tease and call DONTÉ radical left. Sometimes he is. Sometimes he says I'm radical left. I don't think I'm radical left. I'm left of center, but I don't think I'm radical left or far left. But DONTÉ, he leans a little bit more left than me, but that's okay, DONTÉ. That's okay.
Let it be.
All right.
Let it be.
So let's get into our main topic. So we brought Tiffany here today because y'all listen to this show every week. DONTÉ and we tend to get into some serious topics, and we never shy away from talking about race. Race is something that we have to confront and talk about, and often we always have our perspectives, but we lack a perspective from somebody who is white. So Tiffany is not the spokesperson for white people. Let me just say that right off the bat on this episode, but I think that having her perspective on this episode is important, and we're going to be discussing allyship on this episode. And I feel like the universe just worked because I feel like there's not been a better week where Tiffany could come on the show because allyship is very relevant right now. So that's what we're going to be discussing on this episode. And to preface, let me just say this. I think that Tiffany is an ally just based on seeing her content and stuff. So the question that I want to start out with, Tiffany, is, how did you come to have this mindset that you have? How did you develop this worldview and come to be this woke, I guess? I hate that word, but
it's been ruined. It used to be a very useful term, but yeah, now it's been tainted with irony and cynicism. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, going back to like my political, journey, I don't remember being like too political until I turned 18. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to start voting. I want to start paying attention to the news and everything. I remember I did start paying attention to Black Lives Matter. It would have been 2014. So I was 18. And that was when Eric Garner was murdered and Mike Brown. So that's when I started to pay attention to police brutality as an issue. And again, like this whole conversation, it's like, it's wild to have a white person come and speak about racism because it's like, we don't need my perspective. I acknowledge how crazy it is for me to say like, oh, I didn't really have to think about police brutality as an issue until this point. That on its own is absurd. In terms of my larger like political shift in my ideology. That was definitely in 2015. I became a big Bernie bro. And before then, I feel like I was just like a standard Democrat. Like I even found an old post on my Instagram posting a cute old picture of Hillary Clinton, who I now despise.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I was like, yeah, like gonna vote for Hillary. And then I found out about Bernie and his platform, and it was a lot more, further left and just deeper than the standard, corporate Democrat type of platform that Hillary was running on.
Don't even get us started.
I know. It gets me heated. But from there, I started to pay attention more to wealth inequality. And I was always pretty attuned into class issues. And then I, learning about the disproportionate impacts on BIPOC communities. So slowly these pieces started, building, and my ideology was built. And now I don't really know what my label is in terms of, I don't know. At some point I thought I was a social democrat, and then I thought I was a democratic socialist. Now I just use leftist as a very vague term. But that's also because I know that my perspectives and my ideology is always shifting, and I want to give myself room to learn more. It's not like I've read all the theory. I don't think you need to read all this dense political theory, but I can at least look at the existing political system that we have and see this is all bullshit. The Overton window is shifted so far to the right. Being called a radical leftist that supports Bernie is people say this all the time, but in other countries, in European countries, it's you're a centrist, basically. But we're called crazy, commies over here.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous.
All the time. People say that, I'm radical left because I think that people should have access to healthcare, and you shouldn't have to choose between buying your life-saving medicine and paying your bills every month. But, I'm radical. But hey, that's my hill to die on. I'll take it. I'll die on that.
People have a right to live for free or what?
Oh my God.
It's oh my God. It's crazy.
Or down there in Texas where Justin's at, you guys want to tax water, tax air. You want to do everything, privatize your grid. And that's why people died, so I don't know. I'll take my leftist title.
Complain all you want, DONTÉ. The taxes are lower, no state income tax. DONTÉ's from New Jersey. They tax stuff ridiculously over there. Tiffany's from New York. Her rent is probably crazy. In Texas, it's a little bit, better.
But you know what? In the winter when there's a storm, we don't got to worry about people freezing to death. And we don't got to worry about our senators flying to Cancun either.
Yikes. But also, it's not the Texans, it's some Texans' faults for, who they vote for. But generally, especially with those storms and how unprepared Texas was in terms of infrastructure, we shouldn't be blaming the average Texan for suffering because of what their government has done.
Exactly.
So, Tiffany, I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about since 2015, your worldview has changed and some of the molding that has happened to you as a person. Have you ever lost people who you thought were friends over some of your views in the way that you've grown as a person?
Not really, because again, I think I'm actually from Southern California originally. So looking back, I'm okay, I was clearly just a standard Democrat who didn't think critically about anything, but I was vote blue, whatever. I'm liberal. Didn't know what that meant.
I'm liberal.
So I think my hometown group of close friends that I'm still friends with, even though I live across the country, I'm pretty sure they're all leftists. We're all aligned in those, same ways. I'm sure we disagree on some issues, but no, I haven't had any major falling out with friends because I haven't made those friends. I think I would have weeded them out a long time ago. Did not finish my sentence there. But I think even before I was politically active, I think I was way more active in 2015 and onward. Now I'm excited about voting in primaries, which is not something that a lot of people are. Even though I'm I don't know how much faith I have in, voting, but vote anyway. But yeah, I think even before that I was outspoken in different ways, but I just think it was that there were less issues on my radar. And so over time, it's you add all the depth of, all the different things that you need to pay attention to.
I was unfair at the beginning of this episode. I self-identified you as an ally, but you never even said yes or no about whether or not you are an ally or not. So let me just let you clarify on that before I, put words in your mouth.
Well, okay. The whole discourse about allyship has been really interesting because, again, like every white person especially has learned a lot, especially since last summer when the protests were at their peak. Black Lives Matter. And so there was a lot of discourse about like, what is an ally? Can white people declare themselves to be allies? Or is that something that can only be like put upon you by the Black community or by other people of color? So I've been hesitant. I definitely do not want to be someone who's like, I'm an ally, because there's so much that gets into being performative or trying to prove that you're a good white person. And that's just not only cringy, but like just uncomfortable for me. In terms of like, do I support the Black community and do I want to do everything I can to like dismantle white supremacy? Yes. If that's what makes an ally, great. I've also seen, I think it was the account No White Saviors on Instagram. Love their posts. I think they posted something like, you shouldn't be allies, you should be co-conspirators. I was like, that's interesting. Gosh. But now it's like there's so much to the language of it. But generally it's like, yes, do I support Black Lives Matter? Of course. Do I try to integrate, talking about race and other issues in my videos because that's like my main platform? Of course.
So I guess another question to bounce off of that question would be, people always talk about politics and how people need to surround themselves with people that think differently. So if you're a Democrat, it's good to surround yourself, that's what they say, with Republicans or conservatives, just so you can open up your worldview. I somewhat kind of agree with that, but at the same time, I'm learning that maybe I don't agree with that at all. Do you find it necessary to surround yourself with opinions that are different from yours? That might be polar opposites, dare I say.
Polar opposites. Oh God, it's such a hard question too, because like people have had a lot of discussions again. How do you deal with, friends or family that you've realized are racist or homophobic or any other, terrible identifiers? And so I definitely have extended family that I strongly disagree with. And anytime I see their posts or whatever, I'm just like, yikes. And I haven't really had the opportunity to have those like conversations, though I like to think that I would. It's interesting because I'm like, I feel like I'm outspoken. Like I'm definitely willing to have these conversations on YouTube because like that's my platform and I feel like I get to, say what I want to say, how I want to say it. But then it's like in person, it can be a different situation because I'm very like non-confrontational. And when do you want to really start a big fight or a discussion with your family at Thanksgiving or or just random people that you're interacting with? It's like, that's something that I've really felt bad about myself for. Like I feel like a coward because I've had situations where I've witnessed someone say something up, like another laundry situation, random. Right. I was in my other building's like laundry basement with this like old white man and this other woman. Ew. And he said something about her not speaking English or something. Oh, great. And I was just like, I think I just uncomfortably stood there, but I immediately felt like a for not saying something and like directly standing up for her. I was like, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I call this dude out? But then I'm also like, well, I'm trying to do my laundry and I'm not trying to like provoke a man in this basement. Like there are these like...
That sounds super shady.
Yeah, when it comes to like strangers especially, or like we've had a lot of conversations about bystander intervention lately too. And I'm like, yes, I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to, put myself in that position. But then I also know I have the tendency of being like, well, I don't want to get attacked and I'm a small woman and I'm not very strong. So like, I don't know. Yeah, I definitely...
Hard balance.
It is a hard thing to balance. And it's tricky. I don't know how to gain that confidence, I guess, to be willing to put yourself in that position. It's even something like when it comes to protesting, like you kind of have to know you might get pepper sprayed or you might get attacked. You might get hit with something. You might get beaten. Mm-hmm. You have to be accepting and willing to do that. I guess I've struggled with that, but it also takes a certain person to do that. And I think there are different skills that people can use. Like not everyone has to be out in the streets and some people aren't able to do that. But yeah, I definitely feel conflicted. And COVID, yeah. That was a whole other consideration as well.
I think that with your platform that you would reach more people speaking about these things than you would marching in the streets, right?
Or yelling at the guy in the laundry room.
Right. But you brought up, where's the time to have those conversations in person? Do you ruin Thanksgiving by saying, "Hey, Uncle Joe, can you pass the stuffing? By the way, Black lives do matter in this country." That's super awkward.
Right, let's get into it. Let's talk about abolishing the police. Yikes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I have a follow-up question about that. How uncomfortable is it to talk about these things with other white people?
I mean, again, it's like, I've definitely had some conversations, so I know I need to have more. I guess my issue also is like, especially in the last year and a half now, I've been so isolated. Like, I've only been in this apartment with my boyfriend. So like, my social reach is very small in terms of like actual physical interaction. So I'm like, thinking back to what it's like to interact with people, that seems like, a world away. On one hand, I struggle because, like Justin, your question was like, how do you deal with people who don't agree with you? They might be opposites. Like, on one hand, if people are like, "Oh, would you be friends with a Trumpy conservative?" And I'm like, no. No, I wouldn't, because like, we would just not align on so many key issues that like, I cannot imagine having a close relationship with someone like that. But then on the other hand, I know that us isolating ourselves, and especially among the left, we have like, the left eats itself. So there's always someone who's more, more radical than you, or considers themselves to be more woke. And so we tend to argue amongst ourselves. But it's so important for us to learn to have those conversations and how to, be willing to put in the time to like unravel these things. So like, I feel like the difference is like, do I have the time and the space to like really get into it with this person? Because like, I will sit and be like, I will pull up my mental PowerPoint and be like, let me tell you the facts that I know, but I'm going to try to be, you have to try to be compassionate and a little understanding, even if you don't think they deserve that. Because I think that's one of the more effective ways to get through to them. I think the conflict is like, you can rant at someone and you can call them, a racist, like conservative or whatever, or you can try to get on their level and try to see where you have, maybe some common ground, and then maybe ask more questions to understand their viewpoints. But that level of patience is really hard to have.
Yes.
So
Tiffany, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
I feel your pain because I've had many opportunities to respond to these, conservative cockroaches coming into my DMs and writing me essays and stuff. I'm like, I don't have the time for that.
Right.
I don't have the time. And I think there's so many times that we're challenged. And if you don't have the energy, you don't have to respond. A lot of our listeners, I would say, are on the left. And I feel like there's a lot of people listening to what you said. And they might say that, man, if you have the choice to react and call somebody out and hold somebody accountable while you're there, you should do it. And by not doing it, that might be like, in a way, privilege.
Right. Giving them a free pass. Yeah.
Because even though I'm Black and, obviously it's different for me, there was one time when I was in college, I came back home and I went to church with my family. And there was an older white couple sitting in front of us in the pew in front of us. And we had a guest, like pastor or whatever, come in. He was either Asian or Hispanic, and he had a very thick accent. I could make out what he was saying because my parents are Nigerian, so I'm used to, an accent and hearing that all the time. But they had no idea, in quotes, what he was saying. So they were whispering to themselves. The lady was like, "Is he speaking Spanish?
Oh my God.
What is he saying?" And they were saying it in a rude way to the point where other people can hear that.
Exactly.
And that was making my blood boil. I was like, I can't stand this anymore. And I got, I think, radicalized, I guess, in 2016 when Trump came along and all of the people that I had to reevaluate in my life, I'm like, don't trust you, unfollow, mute, block, bye. Like, that was me. So obviously this happened after 2016. So after the service was over, everybody was getting up to leave. And I said, excuse me, what you were saying about that pastor was so disrespectful. And as a member of this church, I expect better. Mm-hmm. You should be ashamed of yourself. You really should. And I'm embarrassed for you. And I said that to them and the lady was like shook. And I was like, yeah, you better be shook.
I love that. I admire that so much. And like, again, I want to be that person. I feel like in my mind, I'm that person. But in person, I'm like, I don't know if I can actually speak up. Even in a movie theater, like people are sitting there whispering or eating their food really loud. And I'm like, I want to just be like, hey, shut up. We're watching a movie. And then I say nothing. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, all of your, conflict in your head is worth nothing if you can't speak on it. But yeah, no, I especially think in a situation like that, though, you're in at least a shared space. So you do have something in common and maybe they'll respect you more because you're, in the same community as them. But also some people don't give a fuck, and clearly they were trying to be disrespectful. like blatantly. It's like, again, if you want to talk about that after and be like, oh, I couldn't really understand. Sure. But like to be saying it loudly, you're trying to get attention. You're trying to make other people either agree with you or make the pastor in this situation uncomfortable. It's like, why? I mean, I can't imagine being that person, but
right.
A lot of people behave that way.
Right.
Justin felt comfortable because he confronted them in a church and people are there to worship their Lord. But you have to remember that it's Texas and they're about that life with those guns. So that was very brave of you, Justin, because they let them things off where you're from.
I don't care. See, this is where stereotyping comes into play. DONTÉ thinks that every Texan is just wielding a gun and all this kind of stuff. It's not like that. We don't wear cowboy hats like that. We don't ride horses in the streets.
I'm surprised.
Come on.
This is news.
DONTÉ thinks that everybody's just packing a gun. It's not like that, especially in a church. What are you defending yourself from in a church? Well, actually, let me
You never know.
Church
honestly.
Yeah, Dylan Roof, man. Like in my church, we have somebody armed all the time now because of that. Just in case somebody ever comes in there and tries to be crazy. And that's the sad state of affairs that our world is in.
Here's a heavy question. Let's get this heavy question out of the way. Tiffany, white supremacy. White supremacy in the system that we're in, unfortunately, this is the legacy of this country where people have been, able to benefit based on everything that, Black people and other people have built for this country. So with the advantages that you have, as a white person and, as a white woman, what do you say to people that say that you're going against your best interests by trying to fight white supremacy because you already have it good? So why make it harder for yourself by tearing down the advantages that you do already have?
Right. I know I've gotten comments sometimes, like, it's so funny. Anytime I even briefly mention race in a video, I'll get some comments that are like, you're a race traitor. You should be, defending white. Ew. I'm like, no, this is not the space for that.
I've seen them on her videos this week, actually, when I was binging. I've seen those comments. Wow. So yes.
Yeah. Yikes. Oh God. Those people, I'm just like, no, we do not agree. This is not the space where that is going to fly. And clearly, like I just said it in the video, why do you think you would change my mind in my comments? Whatever. It's interesting because like the whole idea of obviously being a white person who benefits under white supremacy, it reminds me of what some men think will happen if we were to actually have a feminist world. And like, what would they be losing by like, it's always that idea, like you're losing something because other people are gaining, more equity or equality in society. And it's just like, for me, it's just like, it really is just a moral issue. And like, I cannot imagine, especially being a leftist and caring about other issues that are all intersectional. Like you can't remove white supremacy from it. You can't remove racism from all of the things that I'm in favor of. So like, first of all, it would just be completely hypocritical for me to be like, I think, we should have healthcare and housing for all, but also like white supremacy doesn't exist. It's like, what the fuck? Like, it makes no sense. It just doesn't. It really doesn't. And so also I'm like, what do I have to lose? It's an interesting question. I mean, how would, not living in a white supremacist society change my life? It's like, okay, I don't know, if I go to get a job and then I have more competition, okay. Like that doesn't really harm me because again, I've been in this privileged position already and it's hard to even theoretically discuss like how that affects me. But then it's like, on the other hand, how would that change the lives of people who are not white and who have been actually suffering under white supremacy? It's like, clearly there's the difference there. On YouTube, for example, I could be very selfish and say like, I want to dominate commentary and I don't want anyone else to be successful. But it's like, first of all, I can't be everything for the commentary sphere. And there are tons of topics that are not my forte, not anything that I need to be speaking on. So like recently I've been seeing so many great commentary channels, up and coming, especially Black women in the commentary sphere. And that was something that we so much needed because like for a long time it was dominated by like funny white guys. And then you get, somebody like me. Oh, great. A cis straight white girl, like, okay, is that progress? Maybe a little. But then it's like, we only benefit as a community from, more people having opportunities, and it makes YouTube a more interesting space. And also just because people are watching other creators doesn't mean it really takes away from me. I kind of think about it that way. Like it's just a selfish thing to think that I deserve, like either as a white person or as a creator on YouTube, like a disproportionate amount of privilege or attention or money or whatever. It's like, Jeez, I'm just I am trying to remove myself from that and not be selfish, basically.
I don't understand it because making us whole does not take away from anybody else. You know, affording us the same opportunities at the same rates does not take away from anybody else.
No, it's true. It's true. And I wish more people understood that. Like, it's refreshing, like, talking to Tiffany, because she gets it. She understands it. But when I talk to other people, it's almost an unwillingness to change or to think differently. I think people sometimes get so comfortable in the world being the way it is, but people never question why things are the way they are. I always tell people that listen to the show, question everything, because things didn't just come here just because. Things happened a certain way, and that's why we're experiencing the world that we're having now. Why is it that police are never held accountable? Why is it that black people always seem to die when it comes to any situation dealing with arrest? It doesn't make sense. Like when we talk about, I think, Ma'Khia Bryant, why is it that your first instinct is to go for a gun and shoot 4 times in somebody's chest rather than alleviating the situation? Why is everything always escalated? But when I talk to somebody else, it's like, oh, she had a knife. They always try and justify it. And my theory is they understand the truth, and they know that by dismantling white supremacy, their illusion and the way they see the world will change, and they're so comfortable living in that fake reality that they don't want that to happen. So that's why they enact all these voting laws, because they see Georgia turning, oh my god, diversity and everything, everybody's going crazy. The world is changing, and you either go with the tide or you're a relic of the past.
I watched a video of a cop in Colorado went to a call at a supermarket, and a guy there, I guess he was on drugs, had 2 knives in his hands, and he was literally chasing the cop around his own car, his own cop car, for 12 minutes. But you can pull up to a scene, girls fighting, they're young black girls, one of them has a knife, you shoot, no questions asked, but you let this man chase you around your car. So that's what we're getting at here, right? For anybody that says, hey, you know, racism doesn't exist and, you know, has counterpoints to everything that we're discussing today, if you're a white person, honestly ask yourself, would you want to be black? Would you want to trade spots with me or Justin? Because I mean, if once you say no, then you have your answer. We have it a little harder.
When we saw what happened over the summer, everybody was posting all these infographics and all of this, you know, helpful information to donate, and people had things to say because they're like, this is performative. Because I know for me that I was seeing people that I know that are racist that are posting all this stuff, how to help black people. I love black people, black square, fist of righteousness, yes. And I'm like, this is so fake. Y'all are so fake. So, you know, when you see that kind of stuff, how does that make you feel? Because people think that when they post a black square, their job is done. Oh, I'm an ally. I'm not racist. I've done the bare minimum. Woo! I can sit back and relax and it's over. I'm done. What do you think about performativeness with allyship? And, sorry, so many questions. Are black people or people that want to hold white people accountable too hard on people that want to be allies but don't know the best way to do that?
So many good questions. Yeah, the summer, there were obviously so many benefits from the rise of infographics and the rise of sharing petitions and, you know, people coming out and saying, like, I haven't been political really before, but I'm going to now, and I'm going to speak about these issues. That's all great. But we did also very quickly have this question of performativity and, yeah, people who have never spoken on it before. Why are you suddenly posting now? Maybe because people are asking you to post about it or demanding that you post about it. I was thinking about it from, of course, an internet analysis lens. I was like, I'm going through this as a creator, trying to navigate what to post and how to genuinely help. Because, like, I've been talking about, you know, political issues or racial issues or whatever, so-called controversial issues for years. So, like, that's never been an issue on my platform. I think I've weeded out any people who are too, you know, opposed to that a long time ago. I used to get people who are like, how dare you talk about politics or talk about these issues? Like, YouTube should be a fun space. I'm like, no, not here. Like, if I need to talk about this, goodbye. Find somebody else who's going to be apolitical, because there's plenty of people who will do that. But yeah, so as a creator myself and someone with a platform, that's where I was like, okay, I obviously want to be helpful. This is a huge moment. This, you know, I want to be part of it. But then it's also like, you're analyzing your own reasonings. It's like, am I doing this because I'm performative? It's really hard to get to that point where you're like, am I genuinely posting this because I need to or because it looks good? Even from people who do genuinely care. So I feel like I got very self-aware and I was like, I don't want to post anything because now I'm questioning it, or like, am I posting the right thing? Because there was a lot of stuff going around about either like police reform versus police abolition, and like, you don't want to be wrong, so like, which infographic do you share? There's so much that goes into it. This has been on my internet analysis list for a long time, but I don't think I'll ever be able to cover it just because I don't think I could do the topic justice in the like extremely nuanced way that it needs to be covered. But yeah, it's like, I mean, there were some very clearly performative situations. The black square, that was such a, I mean, they tried, anyone who posted it. It was meant to be a good thing, but it's like, if you think critically about this for 1 second, what does this accomplish? That's kind of the question where, like, at least now where I continue to post things, does it raise awareness? Do I link to a GoFundMe? Like, can this materially help someone? Or can I spread awareness of someone who's missing, or like something? Like, you can see what actions can come out of what you're posting versus like, is it truly just a signal? And that's what the black square was like, it didn't offer any information. It wasn't informative. It wasn't helpful. And it actually ended up taking up valuable space. And so that was such a moment. There was so much going on all in that one day where people are like, now you've got to take down the black squares, and now you've got to yell at the people who put them up. And it's like, it was messy. And again, it's like, it all distracts from the actual issue. It's so petty for, then white people to be arguing with other white people about what we're posting. And it's like, Jesus Christ. It's a lot.
Right. Good intentions, but horrible execution. My thing was that let's do something where we do a mass donation. Imagine how much money they would have raised had they done a post as a reminder that you donated, rather than just a black square that does nothing. I was angry.
Could you imagine the level of clout chasing people would have done if it would have been like, hey, everybody donate on this day and then post your donation? People would be like, well, I did $5. And somebody else would go post again like, well, I did $5 earlier. Now I'm doing 15. That's a great idea, Justin. I want to answer a question that you asked Tiffany. I want to answer it from my perspective for a second. When you said, do you think black people are too hard on people that are trying to be allies, but maybe don't know how to approach it the right way? Yes, obviously. Obviously, you are one of those people. Sometimes people don't have the knowledge and they want to know more. Their hearts might be genuine and pure in being like, hey, I want to help however I can. We shouldn't attack those people. We should teach them how to help us. Sometimes that's the way to get help. You teach people how to help you.
But I think sometimes I like the sentiment. Let me just give you your applause and your flowers before I go into you. But, I feel like that kind of thinking got us here in the first place. This kind of like your heart is in the right place. And then it had people thinking that a black square is good enough to show that they're down with the cause. But I expect more. I'm not a bare minimum type guy. I want you to do your best and give your best attempt at trying to do the right thing. And I think that awarding and applauding a black square and saying their heart's in the right place, I don't think that's effective for anybody.
I wasn't talking about the black square specifically. I'm just saying somebody that has it in their heart and in their mind that, hey, I want to be a part of the solution. I want to help. We should afford them the chance to be able to help. And I think at times, and not specifically you, but at times, black people, especially black Twitter, is like, oh, the white people, no, keep them away from this. No, we can't let them help. That's a misguided viewpoint.
I was just going to say, from what I've seen, there are so many cliches in this conversation now, like, again, coming from white people who are trying to be allies or at least show that they're allies. So many cliches that have been established in the last year now. It's like listening and learning, like, oh, if I hear one more person say that, even though it's like, yes, you should be listening and learning, it just now sounds so cringe. For me, like, as a white person, I would not go into or like onto like a black person's page, like on Instagram. The activists or writers that I follow, they often post about like, here's this white person being crazy in my mentions or in my comments. I'm gonna call them out because this is my space and I have every right to do so. It's interesting to watch those situations because it's like, clearly, I just don't understand. These white people are going onto these pages. They want to follow so that they can learn more about either the black experience, that's vague, or like whatever, for whatever reason they're following. And they're trying to be better, but then it's like, you're clearly not listening. And I do think white people should probably shut up a little more. Even if you think you're shutting up enough, probably a little bit more. And if you're thinking about sending, especially like a lot of them are black women, if you're thinking about sending a black woman a message disagreeing with her experience, like, don't. Like, you don't need to. You don't need to say that. You don't need to leave a comment. Maybe just sit on it for a little bit and think about it. Because I have seen some shit where it's just like, again, these white people are trying to be helpful or trying to learn, but they're also, a lot of it comes out of like being defensive. and being like, oh, well, maybe you're being a little too harsh on the other white people. It's like, dude, come on. Again, we need to get rid of that sensitivity. And again, it's like, kind of remind yourself, we're in a white supremacist society. You're trying to listen and be better, but now you're jumping in to be like, but don't be too mean. It's like, okay, like if you can't handle like basic things or like getting called out for like very valid shit, then like don't get in somebody's mentions or don't get in somebody's DMs. All you have to do is be passive to not do that. Like nobody's going to attack someone who didn't say anything to them. So yeah, just generally, I would say as a white person myself, I will never tell any black person that their response to something is wrong or like that they're being too emotional or they're being too angry. Not my place. I have no reason to have an opinion on that. And like the best you can do is like, again, if it's someone you support, you want to, follow, you want to listen to their stuff, great. And if it's someone you so strongly disagree with, just leave them alone. Like you don't need to be bothering them constantly and telling them how much you disagree, because I'm sure they get enough of that,
Tiffany, prayer cloth moment. So that's whenever somebody makes a really excellent point. We call that a prayer cloth moment. We get out our prayer cloth and dab our forehead with the sweat. Tiffany.
Oh my God.
Congrats. That was a prayer cloth moment. You spoke some truth. I feel like the problem that some white people have is that white people for the longest time have always been the center of every conversation. And when a conversation is not centered on them, they feel uncomfortable. It's like, I don't matter.
Yeah.
So, Black lives matter. What about white lives? All lives matter. I think that that's part of the issue. I'll say that it's not on Black people to always educate. So that's what I was going to say in response to DONTÉ. It's exhausting always having to educate some white person that doesn't get it. And I think that that's the job of a white ally, to educate that person that's uneducated.
Definitely.
Not Black people, because we're exhausted. How many more conversations are we going to continue to have? There are books, there are resources, there are things to read that you can do on your own. A Black person shouldn't have to tell you, this is what I go through, with history of white supremacy in this country, here's what it is.
Right.
No, we don't need to do that. A lot of people were posting, and some people weren't posting when it came to, George Floyd. Is it okay to say nothing at all on social media?
I think it's definitely important to say where you stand, but it's also a little tricky because it's like, this was a topic that I thought about even before like this last year, but like just generally the idea of like, how do people respond to tragedies publicly online? I think that's really fascinating. Like that went all the way back to, do you remember when, was it the Notre Dame that like got on fire in Paris?
The cathedral.
Do you remember when that would happen? And that happened, and then everyone had to post like their memories of being in Paris, and it was like, what the are you doing? Like, why do you have to weigh in on this and act like you have this personal connection to this, destination that you visited once? But then, in a more serious note, like every time we have a mass shooting, which again has had an uptick recently as well, it became a thing where it was like there was this cycle of mass shooting, and then people would say, thoughts and prayers, and then people would say, yeah, but we need gun control, and then other people would say, don't politicize this, it's too soon. And it was just so predictable, because the way that at least Twitter responds to these tragedies as a whole, it's like, it's always the same, and nothing productive tends to come out of it. And it's just kind of, it's frustrating to see it happen over and over. So like, yeah, personally, like I've never been really the type to, when there's a random, not random as in like meaningless, but just like less connected to me, there's an earthquake somewhere or there's a tsunami, like I don't think anyone can feel obligated that they need to make a statement as an individual on Twitter for each, tragedy or event that happens. But I mean, clearly during the Black Lives Matter protests this summer, it's like that was literally everywhere. And it's like if you in that position make a choice not to speak on it at that point, where literally everyone's talking about it online, like that is a little bit strange to not have something to say.
Right.
And I just don't understand.
You picked your side.
Like again, if you're yeah, exactly. If you're in favor of Black Lives Matter and you support this and you think it's up that George Floyd was just murdered by a police officer or like multiple police officers, why would you not speak on it? The whole neutral, I think it's the idea of the white moderate, the idea that like we can just sit back and not have to speak on things. That is its own position, and that can be an extremely harmful position to not speak out about issues. Right.
Because didn't MLK say, or maybe Malcolm X said that
I think
the most dangerous person is the moderate, or the person that chooses to not take a side?
I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action.
And the only reason I asked this question is because I was, thinking and reflecting on myself and my actions. And I was like, did I go too far? Because what I did when it came to the George Floyd situation, obviously, like Tiffany said, it was so big. And if you weren't talking about it, it's like, why aren't you saying anything? Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on this? So for every person that I saw staying quiet suspiciously, I went and unfollowed them because I was like, nah. You're not somebody that I can trust. Why aren't you saying anything at all? It's very concerning to me to have that type of person around you. I think that people really have to reflect about the people that they surround themselves with or the people that they call friendly or friends or whatever, because you're not friendly or a friend to me if you're staying quiet on this huge issue. I've always had the opinion prior that celebrities or people in the public eye don't have an obligation to say anything, and I somewhat agree with that. I disagree when it comes to huge issues like that because it was so prevalent everywhere.
I think there are certain baselines that I have for you to say that we're at least acquaintances or friendly or whatever. Hey, you have to acknowledge that black people have it a little tougher here, right? You have to acknowledge that racism exists. If we can't get past those two things, then it's like, hey, we don't have to have anything to do with each other because you don't believe in facts and common sense,
right.
And
Honestly.
I don't need that around me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. I know that's the sad and funny thing is like, we're not talking about amorphous kind of theories or ideas. It's like, no, you can look at so many facts, decades and hundreds and thousands of years of facts actually to prove that, like, again, white supremacy is a thing. Racism is a thing. The fact that like some people really want to have that argument, be like, well, I don't really know if that was a Ben Shapiro voice. It just had to come out.
Insert clip.
So again, that has nothing to do with race. And saying that things have nothing to do with race is a pretty good way of explaining that things have nothing to do with race. It's hard to be branded a racist when you keep saying over and over things have nothing to do with race that don't have to do with race.
Exactly. It's like, well, actually, it's like, no. Okay, no. Clearly, like, you're just not even existing in the same realm of reality. And that's, yeah, I can totally understand why you can't. You're not even on the same page. There's no way you're going to get to the same page if someone at this point can't at least acknowledge the basic facts.
And I'm not an activist. I'm not telling everybody to get out your pitchforks or whatever they call it, picket fence, and say, ride after every single thing, whatever it's called. I'm not saying that you have to be an activist because I'm not an activist and I'm never going to pretend to be an activist. And that's why I sometimes think it's a Pandora's box to post about certain issues and then to stay silent on another, because people are going to be like, well, what about this issue? Did you not think that that was important to post on your story or whatever? And I don't want to open that Pandora's box for myself. I know where I stand, and the way that I can kind of neutralize that, I have a platform. If there's something important that I'm passionate about, I can talk about it on the show. I don't have to post about every single police incident. I don't have to.
See, that's the important thing about how you both talked about performative actions earlier, right? When that shooting happened in Atlanta that targeted Asian Americans, I didn't post any infographic on my story or anything like that, but the first thing we did when we recorded an episode that week was address it and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So just because I don't post a performative action doesn't mean that that's not where my sympathies and thoughts lie. And I agree with you 100% there, Justin. See, we do agree sometimes.
See, it happens.
It happens.
It happens, y'all.
Yeah, it is really tricky. Again, especially as someone who, is an influencer in some way.
You are.
This idea that, I know, I'm like, sure, content creator, whatever you want to call it. Someone with a following. Sure. I have felt very conflicted about which things to post about, and knowing that people may note what you're posting about. And even something as tiny as like, oh, do I keep my little story, like saved things updated? Because like maybe I've posted a highlight or something that's relevant to Black Lives Matter, but I didn't put it in my highlight. Now someone's going to see that it's been however many weeks. It's like, it's so weird to get to that point where, like, again, your focus is like, how do I look? How are other people going to perceive me? Like, what are people going to think if I don't post about this thing? But also, I do think we should be very careful about protecting the label of activist, because I think for a minute there, everyone was like, yes, I'm an activist. I am an activist now. I post the tweets and I post the infographics. And it's like, we really should be careful to not let people get that claim, because the people who are really doing the work in person and like putting in the time and, you know, volunteering and literally putting their lives on the line in a lot of situations, those are the activists.
Yes.
Other people, we are consumers of media. We are, you know, people who are trying to keep up with current events. But yeah, it's tough. And then you get to the point where it's like, how much bad news and how much trauma can you handle every week? I feel conflicted because I've been off Twitter for like a couple months now, except when I have like video promos and stuff. But I used to be addicted to Twitter, and it was like my main source of news, and I would primarily use it to like boost important news or essays or takes. But then I was like, this is overwhelming for me. I cannot spend any more time on Twitter just because it's like, as we all know,
much.
It's an exhausting place. But then I felt very guilty that I could essentially turn off, you know, my attention, or like I wasn't going to be paying as close attention to these important issues. And what if I was less informed and I wasn't promoting things on my Twitter? My Twitter's not like massive, but like it's still another platform. So it's very difficult. But then I also am like, well, again, I have the privilege of being white, and it's not like I'm seeing epidemics of white people getting killed or arrested or anything else. It's like, so when specifically like Black people talk about not being able to handle seeing other Black people being killed or harassed or whatever, it's like, I can't even imagine what that level of, you know, daily trauma. And again, like nobody should be expected to post about everything and have a statement about everything, because like you need that time to process things emotionally and to not feel compelled to tune into every single tragedy that is occurring. Because I mean, it is constant, especially with our, you know, global social media.
Tiffany came on here and started preaching. Wow.
She did. We gave her the outline. She's like, I'm going to prepare for this. I love everything that Tiffany is saying so far.
Thank you.
I think it's so funny that you talked about, you know, people claiming to be activists. Like they posted that black square once and they changed their profile to public figure / activist on Instagram.
Oh my God.
Embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
White people are slowly going to become a minority. I've been reading studies that are saying by 2050 or by 20 whatever, white people will be a minority in this country. And it's scaring people. You know, it's a lot of white people are scared. They're like, oh my God, our power is going, oh my God, oh my God. And I can't begin to imagine how that feels as a white person to be in the perspective of a minority coming soon.
Right. And then it's like, don't you have to acknowledge then that being a minority in this country is scary because now you're scared of it?
Hey.
Interesting. If there's nothing wrong with, or if there's nothing threatening or whatever, then why would you be concerned?
Exactly. I don't think that,
DONTÉ, go
that
ahead.
white people will have to worry about what it feels like to be a minority, even when in the number sense they are a minority, because they still hold a lot of the power, right? They are still on these boards. They are still the CEOs. They are still the senators and the representatives and the president. You know, so I think at least in our lifetime, we won't see what those true effects of white people being in a minority is, because they are still in the position of power.
Right.
Very true. Especially, again, when you look at, like, wealth inequality, for example, it's like, again, looking at the numbers, it doesn't make sense that, like, oh, the poor billionaires are only a tiny % of the population. It's like, well, clearly they're not struggling and that they are still able to hold on to so much power and wealth. So it's like, yeah, in that same way, no matter, I mean, again, we're going to have to dismantle this over time, but like, even if we're a smaller portion of the whole country, there's still going to be cities and states and a lot of rural areas, especially, that are going to be still completely dominated by the white populations. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the demographics shift. I'm interested to see that, but also I'm like, yikes. It's just going to create more conflict in different spaces, I think.
Right.
It's going to be basically all the liberal, sane-minded people live on the coast of the country, and then everybody that, you know, but that's kind of what the demographics are now.
Hey, that's controversial, DONTÉ. What are you trying to say?
If you look at voting maps, it's blue on the coastlines, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, California. Then the more inland you get is the more red you see, usually until you get to big centers of, you know, big cities like you have a Chicago and a Milwaukee and a Detroit and everything like that.
You've got the liberal elites on the coast.
Exactly. You know, we love it here, right?
I'm like, sorry, the beach is really nice. I don't know. You gotta say.
If you know, you know. If you know, you know.
I wouldn't know.
But no, you wouldn't. But we talked about, you know, people changing over time, demographics changing over time. But isn't it interesting how we self-segregate here? So, Justin, I heard you talk about how you were in church and there's an older white couple in front of you, and then there's a Hispanic preacher. Like, I live in a very liberal state. That don't happen here. Like, my church is all black people. That's not to say white people aren't welcome. We've had white people become members and join and everything, but my church is the black church, and down the street there's the white church.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It depends on the way you see it. You call it self-segregation. I call it community. Like I always say in all our past episodes, there's nothing wrong with having your own community. I'm being serious. There's nothing wrong with taking pride in your own
agreeing
community.
with you.
I think it's great. You said self-segregation, though. That kind of has a negative connotation to it because it's like we only want to be with our own people. We only,
Well, that does happen, though.
I think that more so applies to specifically white people trying to self-segregate because, again, it's like we've seen like white flight, like
they strive to give their kids good values and access to better things, which is one of the reasons we moved from Martin Luther King Drive to 74th and Euclid, because my mom wanted us to have access to then what were better schools. But unbeknownst to us, we grew up in the period, as I write, called white flight. That is families like ours, upstanding families like ours, who were doing everything we were supposed to do and better. As we moved in, white folks moved out because they were afraid of what our families represented.
It makes sense for, black folks or other communities of color to want to find their communities and have their neighborhoods because, like, clearly, again, because of all of these structural issues and shit, like, you want that comfort, you want that community. Whereas with white people, it tends to be like, oh, I want to be in a safe neighborhood, which has its racial coding usually, or like, I want to be in like a wealthier area, or like, I just feel more comfortable around certain people. And yeah, that's a big yikes. That's something I'm trying to be aware of as I live in New York, so it's kind of like, melting pot. I'm specifically in which I've really enjoyed because I think I've seen different neighborhoods and different neighbors than I would if I were in like the super gentrifier areas. But also I am a gentrifier because I'm, an outsider living in the city. But it's something I'm trying to be aware of in the future. It's really hard to think like I don't really have roots. And so that's something I think about. Like my family's from mostly like Western states, but it's not like I have a hometown where like my family goes back generations. So I just feel like I'm going to be a gentrifier wherever I go. I kind of have to accept that.
Come to grips with it.
Right. But also how can you do that without, again, like instantly moving to like the white or whatever neighborhood or completely taking advantage of gentrification and accelerating it by taking advantage of housing that you don't need to be displacing. But yeah, it's interesting. It's also completely unrelated or somewhat. A question I've had and something that I've wanted to do an internet analysis on that is so controversial and funny is like, do white people have culture? And that just makes me laugh. Because I'm like, on one hand, I truly feel like I have no culture because, again, like my family, like some of them came from like Ireland or Scotland, like however many generations back. Some came from like Canada. So like there's not a lot of culture there. Right. And there's not a lot that like remains in my family in terms of traditions. And I always just laugh because like, I just feel like white people are so like, it's funny to be a white person laughing at white people because it's like it's almost a cliche. Like, oh, I'm not like the other white people. Haha, white people are so silly. But I do laugh at us because I'm like, honestly, let's at the very least we can make fun of us because it's valid. But I just laugh because I wish I had that culture, and I'm jealous of people who have more, traditions or roots in a particular place. Or when you think about what white culture would be defined by, it's fucking embarrassing. It's racist. It's problematic in every way, probably. Like what non-problematic things are distinctly white culture aside from like any embarrassing, like, I don't know, just like,
4th of July, fireworks,
I know, I'm like,
burgers.
Ooh, like, yeah, exactly. Sandals, like, that's all we have.
It's interesting because I actually did an episode a long time ago about white culture and what exactly is white culture. And we had a hard time, asking that
Defining
question
it.
and defining it.
Yeah.
It's like, what is their culture? And then when I had an episode with my friend Steffi, we were talking about, are white people able to have pride in their own culture and in their own thing? And now that you're on the show, I get to ask that to another white person. Do white people have a chance or the ability to celebrate themselves? Because think about it. Black people have black pride. We have black organizations in college. There's no like white student association. Should white people have a space for themselves? And if not, is that fair that they don't?
It's so embarrassing because it's like, how the hell are you going to brand anything white pride and have that not instantly be like, okay, Nazis? Jesus. I don't think we need it. We're not in a position where again, it's like under white supremacy, or like when you're not a minority, when you have all this power, you are not in the position where you need a dedicated like place. That's why we have like LGBT pride, because, heteronormativity. And like, so again, it's like straight pride, white pride. Just don't even try it. That's embarrassing and unnecessary. And I hate when people are like, oh, you're making yourself the victim, because that's annoying. But also you kind of are in that position where it's like, in what instance do you need to celebrate your white pride? And again, what is that? What does that even mean? There's not much to that in my experience, unless we're talking about, again, I don't know, people who want to celebrate their Confederate,
oh my God,
like family members. And then I'm like, please no, we don't need to celebrate that ever again.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Justin, you talked about like having black student council. Why isn't there white student council and things like that? It's because they kept us out of those. So that's why we had to start our own, right? That's why there's HBCUs. Exactly. That's why there's these groups and these associations that are for black people, because we had to start them because we couldn't get a seat at the table. So we had to go make our own table. Simple as that.
No, you're right. And it was a hypothetical question. I always sometimes play devil's advocate. More so it's DONTÉ that likes to play devil's advocate. But, I had to, beg to ask the question, because this is a rare opportunity to ask you what you think about that. Because there's, honestly, we laugh now, but there are people, I swear to you, that believe that white people should be able to have their own pride in their own culture. And I find that very interesting, because what exactly are you celebrating?
Well, you're allowed to be proud of who you are as a person.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. But like, beyond that, it's like, what are you proud of? Let's get into that.
It might be tough as an ally sometimes, because most people might think that in order to be an ally, you almost have to like bash on yourself all the time.
Right.
How has that been? Like always being the brunt of jokes, always, man, white people suck. Did you ever have white guilt, especially when you were learning about stuff like slavery in school? It's like, damn, our people are sick. What's wrong with us?
Literally. I'm fine with like the jokes about white people. Again, same with like jokes about straight people. Like you cannot tell me like that we're disadvantaged in any way. Like we can handle some jokes, we can handle being clowned on, and we deserve it. But also, I'm not like literally self-hating. I don't hate myself because I'm white. I was born into this body and whatever. But like, you also have to acknowledge like, okay, I'm white, and what does that mean about my position in the world? What can I do with that? I have white privilege. How can I use that to not be a person? I think it's very easy to fall into that. It's definitely easy. Like when I think back on, my past again, I think now that we've kind of defined that whole idea of like the distinction between non-racist or like not racist versus anti-racist, I think back to my not racist, quote unquote, life, where I basically didn't have to consider race on a daily basis because it wasn't relevant to me in a direct way. So like, I think back on that, and I definitely do have guilt and embarrassment and shame, because it's like, how the was I so ignorant? How could I possibly be in that position? But then I realize it's not productive for me to beat myself up by being like, oh, you weren't aware of things sooner. Like, okay, sure. Like, again, it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't make me a better person to like beat my past self up. I have to acknowledge that that's a part of my history and like my progression as a person or politically or whatever. Yeah, I think it's important to, as a white ally or just a white person, like try to, acknowledge the feelings you have if you have white guilt or white tears about something, or you're centering yourself in these issues. Again, very cliche things that now people have said a million times. Mm-hmm. And if you're feeling defensive about people making fun of white people or saying that white people are all racist and horrible, it's like, you can sit with those thoughts and feel them, but like move on. Cause like, again, me just sitting here and being like, I hate white people. It's so embarrassing that I'm white. I feel so bad that I was born white. Doesn't help. And it's honestly not even interesting to listen to. Right. So yeah, it's like, okay, move on, do something productive.
Yeah. Cause a lot of people do feel that, you know, a lot of white people saying, oh, in regard to slavery, it wasn't me. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, you might not have been a slave master, but maybe you had a relative who was. So if we're living in this society and we want equality for everyone, you know, what are you doing about that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not even that excuse me, about having a relative who may have been a slave holder, right? It's about, besides that, it's about, hey, you've kind of had a 400-year head start, right? We've kind of been kept out of places and situations and institutions that you've built that we weren't allowed into. We've gotten redlined to live in certain neighborhoods, and that's why we have ghettos. And now they're coming back and gentrifying them, like you talked about earlier. We couldn't get bank loans. We got passed up for jobs. So it's kind of about that 400-year head start. I don't even want to talk about if your family owned slaves, right? It's about you've had advantages and have been able to get to situations that we couldn't. We couldn't own land or own property. That's how you build wealth, and generational wealth is owning things. And we weren't allowed to do that. So that's kind of where, when people have that argument, that's what makes me mad and I get defensive. Like, hey, it's not about you and your family specifically, man.
Right.
Sorry, I had to go on.
No,
I'm glad you clarified, honestly, because that's the point that I agree with as well, that I wish I included in what I said, honestly. Because, you know, you have to come to grips with the truth. And I think that when some white people realize that some of the benefits that they have in life are due to the unfair advantages and all the stuff that they've been given that aren't technically earned, they get defensive. Because if I'm born into this stuff, I feel like, oh, this is right and this is just the way things are. But it's not. You know, those things aren't given to you by divine right. It was stolen.
Right. I know. It's like all discussions of privilege where people get a little defensive and they're like, well, I had struggles, or, you know, or I was a poor white person. Therefore, I had, you know, all these obstacles. And it's like, yes, you did. Everyone has their own challenges and obstacles, and we're all at different levels. But that doesn't mean that you still didn't have some sort of a privilege, and just acknowledge it and move on. Again, it's like, we're not saying that you didn't earn anything in your life or that you're undeserving forever. That whole point reminded me of, like in the discussion for reparations, that would be like if we were like, yeah, we're going to make this really complicated. We're going to actually go back in everyone's ancestry, try to find who, you know, the slaveholders were and who their current ancestors are today. We're going to charge them. And then we're only going to, you know, trace back the enslaved people to today. It's like, no, that's so ridiculously complicated. And that again completely disregards the institution of everything, and that you didn't literally have to have your family directly benefit from this. Because again, I think my family I think they came in like maybe the early 20th century. They weren't, I'm pretty sure none of my family were slaveholders, but like still they came and they were white, and they got to maybe go to Ellis Island and have a head start because they were white, and they were able to get jobs, and they were able to get established and get property. And like, that's as simple as it is. Even if you're a white person who's maybe like a second generation in America, okay, you still had that head start and you had all those benefits, and they may seem invisible to you. I think that's what it is. It's like, as a white person, it feels like there's nothing. Like, it's not like I go to the white line at the fucking store. Yeah. Like, it's not maybe that clear. And then there's the people who talk about like, oh, what about affirmative action? Like, actually, it's really hard for white people to get into college now because they're it's like, shut up. You have so many privileges. Did you go to a good public school? Did you get to benefit from higher property value and then taxes and revenue into your education?
SAT prep.
There's so many factors. Did you get tutors and like, are your parents college educated? There are so many factors. And yeah, it's exhausting.
Yes, man. Tiffany, that was another prayer cloth moment. Dab your forehead, please.
I am honored. That's my favorite thing.
That was good.
This is great. This is amazing. Yeah.
DONTÉ, do we have any questions that we definitely want to ask Tiffany before we kind of wrap things up? I don't want to take too much of her time. She's a busy woman.
No, I know. No, I think that we've had a really good and open discussion, and you know, I have one more question before we wrap up, but I want to make sure you're not going to ask the question, so I'll just go ahead and do it now.
Go ahead.
What would you say to other and I'm doing air quotes for everybody listening to this and not watching, what would you say to other white allies or people who want to be an ally? You know, what would your advice be to them?
I guess specifically in my sphere of like internet people or YouTubers or whatever, anyone with an influence, I would, tell them to figure out ways that you can put your allyship or your education or whatever you're learning and listening to, like put that into your work. Try to spread that in a way that's like natural to you. Again, I think I'm lucky in the sense that like talking about social issues, including racism, is relevant to like the work that I do. I know that some people do maybe like lifestyle or beauty videos, and that might not seem as relevant, but there are still ways that people can use their platform and you can get a little creative, or even like, just what you choose to share, what you choose to start your video with. There are ways to highlight that and to use your platform without it being like, okay, now you need to change your channel to like a I'm a white ally activist channel. Yeah. I'm like, actually, please don't do that.
I mean, that was a great answer. This has been honestly a great episode, like I expected it to be. Tiffany, honestly, thank you so much for your time, for coming on this show. It really does mean a lot. Plug yourself for the people.
Oh, thank you. The YouTube channel is Tiffany Ferg. F-E-R-G. Tiffany Ferg.
I'm the F to the E-R-G, the I, the E.
My Twitter is also Tiffany Ferg, though I'm not very active on that anymore. Instagram is @tferg_. Worst username ever, but I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
But yeah, it was so great to talk with you guys, and it's nice to have a white person in the hot seat for once. Because I feel like, again, I feel like so many Black people, especially in internet spaces, are like invited to talk about racism, or like, here, let's have the racism episode. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like there's so much more that you can discuss rather than, trauma and shit. So I'm glad to be taking the hot seat and hopefully representing myself as a white person in a useful way.
No, you did the thing. You had 2 prayer cloth moments. You did a great job. And you guys that are listening, you made it through the end. If you've made it this far in the conversation, you are a true listener. You're a secret listener or whatever, but we appreciate it either way. Thank you guys so much for making it through to the end. These are the type of conversations that we like to have here on this podcast because they can be funny, they're relevant, and they're important. That's the goal with this show, and I hope you guys share it and love it. We love making it for you guys, so continue listening and continue helping us grow because we appreciate it so much. DONTÉ, I guess you can take us out.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting through this very special episode. And thank you again to Tiffany for joining us on this episode. As always, please like, share, subscribe. Go tell your friends to tell their friends about it. For Justin, I'm DONTÉ. We're polar opposites. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.